Hello friends, today I'm just going to talk about blacks in Second World War. So as they did in First World War, African Americans served with distinction in Second World War also. Over 1,500,000 were drafted into the military, most into the army. But there were others who served in the Navy, the Army Air Corps, and the Merchant Marines as well. Many received decorations for bravery and heroism. One, Dory Miller, a messman on the USS Arizona at the time of the Japanese surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, went on deck, manned a gun, and shot down several enemy planes. He received the Navy Cross for his heroic action. Another African American whose exploits stood out was Infantry Lieutenant Vernon Baker. In April 1945, 1 month before the war in Europe ended, Baker displayed the kind of courage under fire that marked him as a true American hero. When his platoon charged a German mountain stronghold in Italy, he alone took on first a bunker and then a machine gun nest, killing the defending Germans at both places. Then afterwards, when a German grenade that did not explode hit his company commander in the head, Baker killed the grenade thrower. He then charged another bunker, eliminating the Germans inside with a submachine gun he had picked up. For his bravery, he earned the Distinguished Service Cross. Prejudice was so strong against African American servicemen, however, that he did not receive our nation's highest military award, the Congressional Medal of Honor, until 52 years later. Finally, in 1997, at the age of 76, he was given the prestigious award by President Bill Clinton. African Americans, such as Lieutenant Baker, fought in segregated army units during the war. On naval and merchant marine ships, however, they served side by side with white sailors and mariners. There were even several racially mixed merchant marine vessels that were commanded by black captains. The first African American to command such a ship was Hugh Malzac. He captained the Booker T. Washington, a Liberty ship commissioned in 1942 that made 22 round-trip voyages across the Atlantic. Captain Malzac's ship transported thousands of tons of cargo and thousands of troops to Europe, and he never lost a single crewman to enemy fire. His unblemished record attests to his skill in dodging German U-boats. The most famous African-American servicemen of Second World War belonged to the all-black 332nd Fighter Group. Because they trained at a base near the Alabama town of Tuskegee, they were referred to as the Tuskegee Airmen. More than 900 black fighter pilots were trained at Tuskegee, 455 of whom went on to fight in the skies over North Africa, Sicily, and Europe. They flew escort for American bombers, and their skills as airmen resulted in not a single bomber assigned to their care being lost. Commanded by Colonel Benjamin O. Davis Jr., who later became the first black general in the U.S. Air Force. The 332nd flew more than 1,500 missions. It shot down more than 100 enemy planes, 66 of its pilots giving their lives in the process. Many of the fighter group's pilots received the Distinguished Flying Cross at the end of the war. It is ironic that while African American servicemen and women, many of whom served in the WWII and the WWIIs, were fighting for their country overseas, blacks at home continued to face prejudice and discrimination in the workplace and elsewhere. It took the threat of a huge march on Washington in 1941 to move President Roosevelt to issue an executive order ending discriminatory hiring practices in the nation's defense plans. The struggle to win equal employment rights in defense plans for African Americans was led by Philip Randolph, who had earlier founded the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, the nation's largest black trade union. Randolph and other black leaders noted in 1940 that of 107,000 workers in the aircraft production industry, only 240 were black, and most of these held lowly janitorial jobs. In addition, about 75,000 qualified African American carpenters, painters, electricians, plumbers, and other skilled craftsmen could not find jobs because of their race. Determined to do something about the situation, Randolph told President Roosevelt that if he failed to address such blatant discrimination, Randolph would lead a mass demonstration in the nation's capital. Roosevelt, knowing that Randolph meant what he said and to avoid the embarrassment such a march could cause, issued Executive Order 18,8002 banning discrimination in the defense industry and in government jobs. To implement the orders, the Fair Employment Practices Committee was established. Unfortunately, the agency had little authority to enforce compliance of its directives, and what few gains African Americans made in attaining jobs in the defense industry were due as much to the desperate need for workers as to any action taken by the FEPC. Also, on the home front, Second World War saw another black migration to the north, similar to the one that had occurred during the Great Migration earlier, and the results were much the same. Competitions for jobs and householding led to race riots in a number of cities in 1943. One in Detroit left 34 people dead, 25 of whom were African Americans, and 700 injured. Another in New York City, which erupted because of the rumor of a murder in Harlem, killed 5 people, injured 400, and caused $5 million in property damage. Altogether, race riots broke out in 47 cities that year. Unlike after First World War, African Americans after the Second World War refused to settle for their pre-war lives. What became the civil rights movement of the 1950s began to seed itself even as the war was being fought. In Chicago in 1942, James Farmer and others founded CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality. Deeply influenced by Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi's nonviolent tactics in his fight for Indian independence from Great Britain, CORE set out on the long struggle to win equal rights for black people. Emulating Gandhi's method of passive resistance, CORE members introduced sit-ins and freedom rides. They succeeded in desegregating some public facilities in the Chicago area. Gains made by CORE were followed by an executive order by President Harry Truman in 1948, ending segregation in the armed forces. The civil rights movement was gearing up. Thank you for listening.